right, good afternoon and welcome to the Patriotic Dragon radio program. Coming to you from WYYZ 1490 AM, your hometown radio station. Uh, the Patriotic Dragon radio program is designed to have an open, honest, thoughtful conversation and bring that back to civility on the radio. We're normally sponsored in part by the Pickens County GOP, and this month's sponsor is Victor's Nail Salon and Solar Nail and Tan. Tony Wynn and Helen Wynn visit their two locations on North Main Street in downtown Jasper or at the Foothills location. And just for full disclosure, the opinions offered on the show are those of the guest and not necessarily that of the Pickens County GOP, WYYZ, or the host. On with us today, we're honored to have John Williamson running for District 51. John, good to have you on with us.
Thanks a lot, Will. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give everybody a chance to get their opinions and get their ideas out there because it is important to discuss the ideas in a format that's relaxed and that type of thing. So I appreciate you taking the time out.
Great, fair enough.
All right. If you would, what I like to do is give the audience a chance, the listeners a chance to hear about your background, before you decide to get into politics, what you were doing prior to that.
Okay, fair enough. Well, my name is John Williamson, and I live up in Gilmer County. Been there for 34 years. I'm a retired medical sales manager, and we have 6 children, 11 grandchildren that live in the county, so we have a vested interest in the mountain counties and how they fare in the future of them. I'm running for the 51st Senate District, which, as you probably know, or have you mentioned, it includes about 8 counties. It's Fannin, Union, Gilmer, Lumpkin, White, Dawson, and parts of Pickens. And I'm not in my district this afternoon, by the way, and also Forsyth counties.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move across the road, but we just make everybody come to here. Because the 14th district doesn't seem to be affected very much because that congressman doesn't come to visit us at all. So,
well, I hope to make a change for you.
That's the reason we got you here. Okay. And you said you were in the medical field, medical sales. What were you in? Were you in big pharma or were you working with doctors, hospitals? What was the people that you worked with?
Well, that's a good question. In today's environment, actually, I sold what I call medical capital equipment called linear radiation accelerators, which basically are for treating cancer. You'll find them in the basement in the big shielded vaults, and typically you use radiation from these machines for treating prostate cancer, breast cancer, and some head and neck cancers. Those are made by a company out in California, by the way, a leader in the world. We do have U.S. technology that exceeds the rest of the world in this country still.
Well, that's nice. So, and it's made in California, not in Juarez.
That's correct.
All right, that's good. Well, talk a little bit about what made you decide to take a look at and decide to eventually make a run for the 51st district.
Well, a number of things, but they all came together about a week or so ago. I've been disqualified, dissatisfied, like a lot of your listeners, with the direction that the legislature has been taking, especially regarding taxation and how it's been hurting us here in the mountain counties. So that's a major issue. That's primarily why I am running, because, as you probably know, our current incumbent was a spearhead for the largest tax increase in the state of Georgia, in spite of running on a platform of no new taxes and keeping taxes low. But there's even more than that, because I believe that our legislature in Atlanta, the establishment, should be moving back towards more what I consider the Republican values in the state. And I wanted to give the voters a choice for transparency, and a choice to wean us away from the values that we seem to be pushed on by the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce and the major corporations in Atlanta. So when I saw that there was going to be nobody to contest or raise their hand to say, hey, we don't want taxes of this magnitude, then that's when I decided that even as a retired person with very little resources, I decided that it's time to stand up.
All right. Well, good. Well, and on that tax format, yeah, the $980 million and the DOT investment, all we can, I think what we can hope for there is to stay on top of what's being spent and hope it doesn't turn out like a federal program of those shovel-ready jobs. But you know, t- tell me from your standpoint, inside of that bill, what was the most egregious part of it? Because I've got about six of them. So
Okay. Well, can I back up just a minute
sure.
and talk about the process of getting funds? And the way a politician or a lot of other people or departments and organizations get money is you got to create a crisis. All right, and that's the issue. If you can create a crisis, and if you can get people to buy into the fact that there is a crisis, well, you've won, because who's not going to try to fix a crisis? Who wouldn't try to help fix a crisis? So I go back to the issue of the transportation crisis that we all of a sudden came with last year. I've been going to the Georgia Public Policy Foundation for a number of years, and I remember being told a few years ago that Georgia ranked, yes, down in the high 40s out of 50 in terms of new road construction. But they also said at the same time that we were ranking about fifth in terms of road maintenance, all right, in the country.
Right.
So my comment, my thoughts at that point was maybe we should rebalance this. But what I'm saying is that it didn't seem to be a major crisis a few years ago, and I realized we all know that the infrastructure needs attention. But my question is it really the crisis that we're told, or are there other ways to solve the problems? And I believe there are. All right, so that's, first of all, let me just say that I'm not quite convinced that we needed $1 billion tax increase to avert a crisis. All right. In terms of the transportation tax, there's a lot of things that bother me about that. And it all has to do with taking money out of the counties and moving it to Atlanta. And this affects us in a number of ways. And the first way, of course, is that the tax becomes an excise tax. The sales tax on fuel becomes an excise tax. And I certainly agree with what was done in terms of turning the tax on a gallon of gasoline into a fixed tax, because the legislature does have to have some stability. And as the gas prices and fuel prices going up and down, as we've seen in the last year, is that they have to have a stable source of revenue. And so I believe in a fixed tax, excise tax on the fuel. Now, it doesn't have to be as high as it is, because obviously we're gaining another $1 billion that's coming from somebody.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. There's not that many tourists.
So we're being taxed. But beyond that is that if you take the sales tax away from the counties, in other words, they now don't collect the sales tax on fuel that they used to collect. So the question is, how much? What penalty is that paying to the counties? Now in Gilmer County, that's about 20% of our sales tax revenue came from fuel. And when I talk about transparency, we cannot get the state to tell us how much fuel tax we have been collecting. It's impossible. So it's very difficult to make decisions if you don't know what's happening. But we're losing 20%. Now, all right, so that's lost tax revenue. The county commissioners saying now we got to raise taxes on cable TV and et cetera to make up for it.
Right.
So that's just one part of it. The sales tax collections also affect your local option special purpose taxes like lost and SPLOST.
Right.
Now, fortunately, we're grandfathered in Gilmer County that if you already had that, you were still being able to collect the effective sales tax that you were collecting. But when it expires from then on, you're not going to be able to have that sales tax revenue. So what does that mean? In Gilmer County, and I haven't looked at all the other numbers, it's about a $500,000 hit a year. So basically, we'll have another $500,000 taken away from the county for the capital expenditures of education as well as the county.
All right, which will entail that as that gets close to sunsetting, that Gilmer County, along with others, will have to go back to the voters and request another special option sales tax to make up the deficit.
That's right.
And it's interesting that when you say that the legislation and the legislators and all their wisdom and legal knowledge would not have made a provision for that transparency to give that information back to the counties that they levied and took the tax money away from.
You're right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
We wonder.
I don't wonder at all. I just try. I just don't say it out too loud. So, okay. Well, I mean that I understand that, and just had a special guest just join us.
Yeah, I apologize. I had to write that guy in the black 200 a letter. I scratched his car coming in.
Oh, okay. All right. He's got good insurance.
Okay.
All right. Well, Stephen Hall, thank you for joining us. Stephen works with Barry Loudermilk's office and is blessed to have a school a teacher working now with his wife in the school system in Pickens County. So we're happy about that.
Does that make us a power couple now?
I think it is. It definitely makes you dinks. And double income, no kids. So, all right. Well, John, some of the other, I would call it your collective points and things that you support. No tax increases, which obviously I think we're all in favor of that because we know that the money, when the government clarifies the point, they know we have fraud, we have waste, and we have abuse that they're going to fix if we give them enough time. Obviously, we don't need tax increases. We need somebody to manage the budget they already have. But some of the other things that you would focus on in your campaign.
Okay, well, I don't want to leave the transportation issue just yet because
Sure.
the last tax increase was just the frosting on the cake for me, because I guess that my concern and why I'm running is that the incumbent seems to be a part of the establishment in Atlanta and focuses on Atlanta and their needs, and the money goes down that way. But there's a history of taking the North Georgia mountain counties for a ride. And the first thing that, as you recall, years ago in 2010, it's not that far away, we had a program called T-Splost, which was a transportation splost. And part of that was that, that was allow you to tax yourself in your 12, there was 12 regions, I guess. You could decide, if the voters decided to tax yourself 1% additional and do some transportation work in that region. But some of that money went to Atlanta, by the way. And oh, by the way, there was a little bit of a blackmail involved in that, because what the fine print said, if you read it, was that if you voted for this T-Splost, then the matching funds that you have to come up with to get state funds was 10%. But if you didn't vote for the Splost, then you had to come up with 30%. So just now, LJ, we got our check for $400,000, and so to get that check, we had to come up with 30%, $120,000. If we had been good boys and done what we were told, we would only have had to pay $40,000. So there's an $80,000 penalty because we didn't do what Atlanta told us to do.
Right.
That's unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what tells me about Atlanta and the establishment is that more than 2/3 of the state voted against this T-Splost. And so the rest of us said, you've seen our feelings about this. Why can't we, now that you've settled it all, you've seen how we felt, get rid of that penalty and bring us back to the 10% again? Well, legislators try to do that, but as usual, they say, well, we tried, but we couldn't. And I'm saying to myself, we've got 2/3 of Georgia that's being penalized. And you telling me that 2/3 of Georgia can't muster enough power in the legislature to get rid of that penalty? I mean, that's certainly another indication of how we in the North Country are being penalized.
Yeah, and it's kind of a tough pill to swallow when we have the Speaker of the House and two of the key congressmen in the 9th, the 14th, and in the 51st and the 54th district. That, like I say, when you start looking at conservative counties, being Forsyth, Dawson, Jackson, and Hall County, it makes it that much harder to swallow that we don't have the ability to reach out to the State House and get a good hearing on our wishes. So
I agree.
Yeah. So
And the final thing about taxes that we don't understand, it was in the paper this week here in Pickens County, was the issue of remember the birthday tax? The birthday tax was moved to another way of taxing the vehicles, TAVT I think they called it. And what that did is that said, hey, listen, we're going to eliminate the ad valorem taxes locally, and once you buy the car, you're going to pay about 7%. That's going to escalate, as usual, but we're going to take that 7.5%. We're going to send it to Atlanta, send most of it to Atlanta. And so you talk to your county CFOs, and you find on several counties, they are actually getting less revenue than they did before. And here we go. We're sending stuff to Atlanta, and if they're really good, they might send some back. I'm still waiting for the check.
yep, it starts to feel like the Washington D.C.
Let me interrupt here, and you may have already answered this. Goes back to why I need to be here on time. But as I hear you talking about taxes, do I assume that you were going from you would advocate from going from a sales tax to a consumption tax for the state somehow?
No, we never discussed that.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll lead my question into that since we were on the topic of taxes. Would you be in favor of going from a sales or from a consumption or income tax system to a consumption tax system?
Yeah, when you say consumption tax, we got to be very careful because some people interpret that as a value-added tax in addition to the income tax.
Sales tax.
I believe in the fair tax. I mean, it's never going to happen, I don't believe, because of the political feedback. But a fair tax is if you read the book and understand how it works. That would
let
be
let me put a explanation or a condition on this. Not on the federal side, but on the state side. I know for a long time the state has brought it up several times, but it's either failed in one house or another, or it's failed to gain traction at all for the session. But yet we live in the hub of fair tax conversation. So I mean, we've had Neil Bortz, who's lived here. Of course, he's been on, and it's been talked about at the federal level a lot. But it can be replicated at the states. We've seen our neighboring states do that. But again, at the state level, would you say that's something that you would favor?
Well, let me ask you, first of all, which states have done that?
Well, 9 states in total.
Yeah.
No, I mean neighboring states. Which?
Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina has.
And Louisiana.
Yeah, Louisiana. Yeah.
Okay, well let's talk about Tennessee for just a moment. Tennessee has no state income tax. Their entire income for the state comes from a 9% sales tax right across the state, and that apparently funds their entire government. Okay, now we look at Georgia right now. Okay, our tax in Gilmer County, anyways, is 7%. So the point of the story is, if you're going to generate break-even revenue by adding a state sales tax, you're probably going to have to increase it more than 2%. You may have to go higher to replace the income tax. That becomes a problem because of the neighboring states. Because now, if Georgia has a higher total tax than Alabama, et cetera, we've got a problem. So I have mixed emotions about that. I haven't done the numbers. I know that Dr. Kristen Rees, who has worked very, very hard for several years, and great frustration, analyzing the Georgia tax code and making alternatives, but it doesn't seem to be appealing to the politicians at the top. So she has a number of plans, even of reducing the state income tax. But again, I leave that as an open issue. I don't have an answer for you because there are issues on both sides.
Yeah. But from the standpoint, if you were to get into office, would that be something that you would be interested in pursuing and get more information and start the dialogue at a state level?
Yes, I would. The issue would have to be, we all talk about revenue neutral.
Right.
And we have to have caps on it. And if you have something like that, you generally need to have a cap on the spending because that's it. Because if the balanced budget that we supposedly have, if you increase the spending, then you're going to raise the sales tax or the flat tax. So there's two things that have to be done.
Sure. Well, I mean, that kind of lends itself to exactly what a lot of true conservatives would like to see, which is something along the lines of the penny plan on the budget side, where we reduce the overall budget in every department, every part of the state government by 1%, no matter what it is, on an annualized basis to help maintain that, to offset the growth. Tennessee is actually looking at Bridison, the governor that was there previously, and the new governor. It's back on their docket to look at in Tennessee because they see that creeping up. Because now you have some counties that are 9.25 and some of the rural counties are 9.75 on that state income tax, and that 0.75 stays local for certain things. But they're looking at forcing Nashville to look at the penny type plan and go toward reducing their budget across the state. And I think if anything, it's going to encourage more growth in industry, and it's going to grow as it already has. People from Michigan, Ohio, and those states with high levels of tax for seniors, as they move south, they stop now in Tennessee. They don't go all the way to Florida. So there's things that definitely have good, strong attributes to that if you're willing to put it out there and do the work to formulate it.
And let me also add a caveat to that to add some light. We're going, I think, something like a sales tax. We have too many small business owners in the state house, and well, both houses, and so also in conjunction with the fact that they're not making a livable income just off of doing legislation. So in passing such a tax, they would be passing on the tax to themselves as well, something that at the federal level has been talked about a lot through the books of Neil Boortz and alike. But again, that it goes back to if we're going to be able to raise it on ourselves, yeah, we're raising it on everybody, I think. So I think that was one of the questions that you brought up, or that I heard of in your discussion there.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you're saying that a sales tax type affects everybody equally, or, that is a good idea, because what we're seeing is that we're seeing property owners and business owners footing the bill, and that's why I sort of like the SPLOST, because it's a sales tax that everybody contributes to the capital expenditures of either the county and the school system. Is that what you had in mind?
No, not a SPLOST at all.
No, but I mean the fact that a sales tax gets everybody involved.
Well, I mean, to each their own, obviously, but I think there was a little bit of concern that you brought up in your conversation of how much involvement is there, and not just on SPLOST levels, but I mean overall, a 30,000-foot view. And again, we're talking about guys that are making, 16, 17,000 off their legislation. But again, they are small business owners. A lot of them are, or they have other jobs that they're doing. So their concerns in raising the taxes on you would be as viable on you as they are on themselves. So that's what I'm getting to.
I understand. I believe
did I make
do,
that
but
pretty clear? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I'm getting some question marks.
well,
I feel like.
that may be the case. However, if you look at the campaign contributions that these people get, that's another source of revenue that seems to be pretty substantial.
Well, I mean, just take, for example, here, Rick Jaspers. I mean, he maxes out, typically doesn't have a high campaign contribution. A lot of your rural area representatives, they're much in the same way. They're going to max out at $2,000, $2,500 for a contributor, and that may be their highest donor. And of course, that goes into those that don't have others running against them in a race. Now, with those that come on board that want to run in a race, obviously the variables change a little bit. But for a lot of our state senators and state reps, they may be in rural areas where they never may see high campaign contributions, nor should they, because there's not a whole lot of gravitational pull towards those races.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and when that's a whole nother subject and a show that we could do a totally different,
Absolutely.
totally different format stuff. Because when I looked at one of the incumbents who's running, and I looked at his numbers, that he's got almost $400,000 war chest. That's hard for somebody who is getting into the political world to compete against somebody with that kind of a war chest. They can buy just ad time, and they can avoid getting out in front of their constituents and answering questions because they can put together a commercial that looks good, looks slick, and sells the idea of the good things they've done versus the things they need to answer for.
And I'll take one more moment on this too. Is that you'll also see that a lot of those that are represented in the under the Gold Dome are usually the retirees or those that have a high income or are in a high income bracket. Typically, retirees, small business owners, those who can be able to take off time do that. That's why you don't see a whole lot of representation for individuals like me at a 30-year millennial age, because it's a struggle for us if we have 9-to-5 jobs to be able to take 40 days off plus. I mean, it's not just 40 days. You're talking about a year-round process. So it's tough to be able to do that. So I can see where somebody can come in who's retiree, doesn't have a whole lot of, has a little bit of extra time on his hands, and can funnel money in to be able to contribute to a campaign. So I can see a little bit both sides.
Yeah.
Is that a pointed comment? I am retired, and my wealth comes from Social Security, and my website is Williamson 2016, and I'm looking for donations if at all self-funded for $10 to $15. I'm like Bernie Sanders, and I guess Trump is taking small donations as well.
Yeah.
But no, it's a very intimidating task to run for public office, and you're probably asking. And we ask everybody, we ask ourselves, is it too intimidating to get good representation?
You bring up some great points. To caveat, I came into this conversation not knowing any of this, but at the same time, I advocate for a lot, not just in one district or another, across the board, for a lot of millennials to get into it. But we also need to be able to answer some of those same questions about why those individuals aren't able to represent. So.
Well, that's a bigger issue than I can answer, except that I can agree with what you just said in terms of when I was working, I was politically naive. All right, I didn't have time. I was busy working and taking care of a family, and I think that's the problem that we have in this country entirely. We look at the Tea Party attendance. You look at many of the political programs, and you'll find it's nothing but retired people. We ask, where are the millennials? Where are the guys that realize that we're buying into taxes that they're going to have to pay for? Where are they?
Yeah, they're either.
That's not just a Democrat point of view. I mean, we've got the same problems in our party as that we have in the Democrat Party. And when I talk about, I would like to go back to Republican principles, and somebody says, who? And I was born again with a conversation with Senator Paul Coverdell, all right, and he explained to me years ago what the Republican principles were, and that stuck, all right. And one of those that I will mention in terms of this conversation is fiscal responsibility. Do we as Republicans have fiscal responsibility? And the answer is no. And this is an issue, and this is what I want to fight for if I go to Atlanta. Not only for the folks in our district, 51st District, and try to stop that money being drained down to Atlanta, but also to try to put our government back on a fiscally sound basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to just cover just kind of, I'll just call them your bullet points of the other issues, and because we're getting a little bit short on time, and I want to make sure that we do get your communications out there. If you would just cover your other main issues that you really want to do when you get to Atlanta. So.
Okay, it's pretty similar to a lot of us in the North Country in terms of my positions. For instance, in education, Common Core's got to go, and Georgia itself has a good educational system. They've got a good way of testing, and what I'm worried about, and what we're all worried about, is that we all know that if you are graded or you're evaluated on a test, you're going to be taught to the test. And that's what's going to happen. Now, if the tests are created by Washington and they require that you give answers that are politically correct, we're in trouble. And this is happening today. I'm older than you are by a good bit, Stephen.
I was about to say, Will, gee.
And you may not remember old-fashioned Russia and the communists. And boy, in those days, we were talking about all those communists. They're teaching revisionist history. They're teaching history that isn't right, isn't real. We need to tell them. And here we are today. If you look at our history books, we in America are teaching revisionist history, and that's got to go. So that's education enough.
Yeah.
And then on the you heard mine on taxation, immigration. First of all, we need to enforce the laws that are on the books. It's very simple, And I don't understand what politicians don't understand about the word illegal immigrants. Illegal means against the law. They broke the law. What we should be saying is criminal immigrants. If we enforce the laws, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be compassionate, but in my opinion, everybody in the United States that walks the land should have an ID. We have to have an ID to go to the airport, to check into a hotel, etc. So that's my position on that. We have a law on the books already that I think Chip Pearson authored years ago about penalties for harboring illegal immigrants, and that's on the books. It's not being enforced. And so that's my thoughts on immigration. And if we have a problem with immigration labor for the hospitality and the agricultural institutions, as we hear, then I believe that we should change the rules and regulations, make programs available so that they can bring in the labor they need, but lawfully. That's all. I'm for the rule of law, and we might need to make changes to accommodate that, but at least let's enforce the law. So that's immigration. Any comment? Is that too?
Well, and let me touch on a couple of those because we talked about education and immigration. It almost sounded like in a lot of those are federal issues, major federal issues. So you going under the Gold Dome there, how would you be able to work with our federal partners in D.C. to be able to resolve some of those issues?
Well, you ask a good question, and that's the question of the 10th Amendment. How much can we encourage our state to stand up to the federal government? And people are doing that now. And the fact that states are resisting adopting Common Core is certainly an example. People are doing that. And you of course raised the old question is that if we take the federal government's money, we're obligated to do things that they tell us to do. And that's a problem. And until we can break that cycle and establish our own responsibility in our state, then we're going to have to fight those battles.
Yep.
But no, I'm not going to cut off the federal aid just despite despite the principles. But we need to look at that, and we can do it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're a balanced budget state, and if we look at the budget that we can live with and work in and reduce it, then we're not as obligated to try and hold our hand out to the federal government. And when you're not holding your hand out, it's a whole lot easier to say no.
That's a fact.
Yeah. All right.
And I hate to be so intense about all of this, but I've been thinking about these things, and you see these things happen, and I'm probably as frustrated as the voters for Trump, okay, or the voters for Bernie, for that matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So which camp are you in?
Pardon?
Which camp are you in, if I can ask? Well, I am going to ask. You don't have to answer. But
I don't think you need to ask. But we won't. We don't want to cause any problems here. Casino gambling, no. Term limits, yes. And I think that the best way to affect term limits is at the ballot box. If we'll get off our butts and go and vote.
All right.
And then the other thing, I'd like to be in Atlanta because I'd like to identify for our constituents up in the North Georgia areas the issues that are being debated, what the implications are for North Georgia voters, and why I voted how I did. We don't seem to get that. There are a lot of votes that are made, and we don't know why they were made. One of my a fan of Jason Spencer, who's down in South Georgia, sends out a newsletter that does exactly that. I've asked Doug Collins to do that. I've asked Tom Graves to do that, and you don't get that. You just get a blurb of what they think you will make you feel good, but you don't have a real idea of the positions that they've taken. So that's transparency.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Yep. And if somebody wants to get more information on your campaign, wants to do that maximum contribution of the $2,500, what's your website and way to get in touch with
It's
your
Williamson2016.com.
Yeah, that's easy. And spell Williamson so that we make sure.
WILLIAMSON 2016.
All right, just like the barbecue, if you're at Williamson Barbecue. All right, well, John, thank you very much for being on with us. And as the campaign progresses, please plan to come back and come back
I
in.
certainly will. And thanks for having me.
All right.
It's been good. It's sort of distracting because I'd rather be out on a motorcycle.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll stop and change everything over. All right, and now joining us on the show is Kathryn White. Kathryn, thank you for being on with us. Kathryn is running for the Board of Education here in Pickens County, Post 1. So thank you, Kathryn.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you guys letting me come out and have some words with you. I'm excited about being here, so thanks again for inviting me.
All right, great. Good to have you on. And joining us, Stephen Hall still in with us, and Bart Conley's graced us with his presence. Thank you, Mr. Bart, for stopping in.
Yeah, I finally woke up and got here. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. There we go. All right. And Bart normally has to slip out a little bit early because he does always want to go follow up on the Board of Commissioners meeting to make sure that he tries his best to keep those people straight as well. So we appreciate his splitting his duties between us, and that's it. Yeah, no, use the stick. I like the stick better. The big stick. Yeah, really. That's. So Kathryn, what I'd like to do, if you would, tell us a little bit about your credentials and your resume. I mean, I've seen it. I'm very impressed with it, but I'd like for you to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, great. Well, I'll start with a little bit of just some background of who I am and where I'm from. I am originally from Peachtree City. I had two wonderful parents, or I still have them, I should say. I'm thankful. I have a younger brother. I went to McIntosh High School in Peachtree City, and then I went on to the University of West Georgia, where I studied education. I have a Bachelor of Science in Education with my concentration in early childhood education. After I graduated, I worked in sales for a couple of years. Before I decided to be a teacher, I wanted to have a little bit of travel time and be a little young for a while. And at one of my jobs, I met my wonderful husband, who I've been married to for 15 years this year. We have three beautiful little children. We have Reagan, who goes to Jasper Middle School. Reese goes to Hill City. And our son, Ridge, is at the preschool at the Baptist Church. Joe works at Pilgrims up in Ellijay, and I currently work for Woodard Companies. We produce accountant and CPA education, and we also produce the largest conference in the world for QuickBooks CPA or QuickBooks Pro advisors. So we're busy always making new education webinars and classes for the accountants and CPAs and bookkeepers all around the country. So I guess that's about as much as far as we also go to Woodstock Jasper Church, where I teach Sunday school there. We've been members there for a while since it kind of started up here. School-wise, I was a teacher for 14 years. I've taught pre-K and kindergarten and first, so all the little guys I've covered. While I was at the last school I was at, I was nominated for Teacher of the Year for 3 times out of the 5 that I was there. I've had various leadership positions. The grade level chair, where I had 7 teachers that reported to me, and then I served on the admin team and made the decisions with the school, with the principals. And I was the professional learning community coach, where we studied the data and strategic plan for our school and held meetings weekly with the group that I was the leader of. And I've also served on the PBIS Discipline Committee, which is, I think, the same discipline, I guess, for lack of a better word, the same curriculum they use for discipline here in Pickens County.
Okay.
And I guess I was also the new teacher mentor there for the past couple of years. I mentored all brand new teachers at the school. So I had a heavy plate there. I wasn't just the teacher of first graders. I had quite a few other positions at the school. I recently left teaching because of all the things that are going on in education today. As we all know, there's things that are happening that are completely different than the way education was even just 5 or 10 years ago. We have teachers that are leaving in rapid numbers. And we just had State Superintendent Richard Woods publish a survey that he did this past year almost 50% of teachers are leaving in the first 5 years, the highest number they've seen. We also have the record low of teachers entering into, students entering into the teaching programs in the college. So we're losing not only teachers that are currently in their jobs, but we're also losing students enrolling into the classes. We've got, we have bombarded our schools with tests. That's all we're doing to our poor students. There's federally mandated tests, state mandated tests, and even the counties are starting to mandate tests. Our state has, we are testing our students 33 times in their school career, whereas the federal limit is, or the federal minimum is 11 times. So we are tripling what federal government thinks is the appropriate number. So there's quite a few reasons I left, but that was the main is the test, the Common Core. Common Core has completely changed the way education is. We're doing a lot of things, especially with our younger students, that are developmentally inappropriate. We are also kind of killing the joy of teaching for teachers. So when I took a step back, I just looked around. It was really hard for me to stand in front of parents and say what we were doing was right. And I knew that I had to step away and think of some ways that I could make a more impact on education. And it's kind of hard to do that when you're employed with the system because of lack of a better word, politics, and being felt like you were going to be reprimanded or held accountable for a differing opinion than what people thought. So I left to pursue other things that I thought would be more beneficial to education. Work with different organizations where we try to pass bills in our legislature. We have different bills there now that we're working really hard to get passed. Work with some other organizations where we teach parents how to refuse the test for their students and to stand up for what's right as a parent, that we should have control over our own students, and also so we can stand up for our local schools. I mean, we have systematically taken all the control away from our local boards of education and given it to the federal government. It's even gotten to the point where it's not even the states that are in control of our schools. And we, in my opinion, know that we best in our own community know what's best for our students. And so there's just a lot of things that I've learned in trying to work really hard in this state and our community to make things better in education.
All right. But I know you're heavily involved in the Senate bill, with the 355 and some of those issues. And I know it sounds like we got some type of compromise bill through.
Yes, because State Bill 355 started out all-inclusive to help protect teachers and students. And another bill got introduced by I can't remember which senator, I'm sorry, but State Bill 364, which was more for teachers, so they kind of pared down our bill, State Bill 355, so we agreed to remove the part about the teachers, and since 364 covered that one. But
Could you quickly talk about the differences between those two?
well, the 364 is more protecting of the teachers. It lowered currently now the evaluations, the test scores of students count 50% towards a teacher's evaluation, which is, in my personal opinion, a travesty for a teacher that 50% of our evaluations as a teacher hinge on 3 days of a student's 180 days with us. It's not fair, that we are placing so much emphasis on these tests. When you do these kind of things, then that's where you get teachers teaching towards tests. That's when you get things that happen like what happened in Atlanta, where they're changing test scores because their livelihood depends on the way these children perform on tests. And these tests are asking to make children like into little widgets. They want us to have all these children fit in square pegs when we all know children are all different. They come from all different backgrounds, and we're asking them. We're saying that all these students have to perform a certain level on these tests to be able to prove how well the teacher in the school is doing. And that's what we fight for so much, is that these tests are not really they're not really helpful for the student. When we give tests as a teacher, we want to have the results back in a timely fashion so we're able to better instruct the student right then. So when these tests come, they're not to benefit the student whatsoever at all, because we don't get the results back for months and months and months. And sometimes, like last year, we didn't even get the test results back until the next school year. That doesn't do anything to help the current teacher that taught the student then when the test was given. It doesn't help the teacher that gets these students, because they're already like 6 months older than they were, 6 months differing than when they took the test. When you give a test to a child, you want to be able to look at your results. I'm not against testing, period. I'm just against testing that doesn't benefit the child and the teacher right then. So I'm sorry, I was a little caveat, but that's 364 was to protect teachers. It helped with the amount that the evaluations count. It lowered it to 30%. Our original bill, which was House Bill 355, lowered it to 10%. So it was a little bit of a compromise. It's definitely not a perfect bill. There's a lot of things in there. It did increase some tests for K through 2, which is what we were trying to get rid of. We think when they're that little that children need to be children and not be tested all the time when they're 5, 6, and 7 years old.
I was going to say, I want to interrupt a little bit, but it does sound like you made incremental steps.
We did, and that's why we didn't fight it, because we were just happy that they made some concessions, and they did recognize that 50% was too much to base a teacher's evaluation on. Now, State Bill 355 protects the child. It gives children that are sick or they're having mental, anxiety issues, or even just any type of physical sickness as well, being able for a doctor to write a note for the student to opt them out of tests, because there's so many students, they place so much emphasis on these tests that the students are becoming physically sick, and the students are already emotionally fragile, or even having more trouble with these tests that they put so much stress on. So it gives some of the abilities for parents to take back their rights of their student, of their own children, and say, no, thank you to these tests. We trust our teachers that have these kids. We don't need these tests that are made by private companies that make a profit off of the backs of our students. We as parents trust our teachers. We trust the local teachers that have our children to tell us what's right for our students and how our students are doing. So that the main difference is 364 protects teachers and 355 protects students and parent rights over their students.
All right. In that same venue, what we're talking about, obviously, and as I've learned more about the Common Core and those issues, and what our local Board of Education members are allowed to do and what they're forbidden to do, what would be your standpoint to as a Post 1 Board of Education member? What would you like to do differently that you're allowed to do?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because when I thought about running for the board first, or when I was approached, so I was asked to run by a couple of different people, I really thought about it, because a lot of the things that really are frustrating to me about education are things that we can't control locally, because so many things have been taken away from local control. I mean, over the years, if you'll go back and look in history, every couple of years, more and more power has been taken away from the local community over our own children. So I had to really think about if this is something I wanted to do, because so much that I really am frustrated with, like the Common Core and the mandated tests, are not controlled at a local level. But when I did think about it, there are some things we can do locally, and that's why after like 2 years of fighting for stuff, I finally had to think in my mind, I need to put my money where my mouth is. I can complain and complain and complain, but complaining is part of the problem. I need to do something about it. And if more people that have the same viewpoints as myself and many others start standing up and trying to get elected for local offices, and then even some of the regional offices, senators, not just people on the board, but more people start standing up against Common Core and the mandated tests, no matter where. If we have more people rise up and start trying to be elected in those positions, we can make a difference, because as a collective voice, we'll be able to say, we don't want this in our community. We don't want Common Core. So one thing is, I'll be able to, whether I can change it or not, I'll still be able to voice my opinion and hopefully more and more people will be able to stand up and voice our opinion. The other things that I think we can change here locally is the morale of our teachers. We have a teacher morale problem. Are you going to say something? I'm sorry.
I was trying to get my mic back.
Sorry. And I'm not saying that's just the case in Pickens County, because it's not. The teacher morale is down across the state. That was very indicative of the survey that Richard Woods did. It's not just a here problem. But I think there's some things we can do here. We need to make sure that we have key leaders in place that value and respect teachers and treat them as the professionals that they are. And we need to make a positive work environment for teachers. So even though there are things that we would have to do that we don't like as teachers, if we felt valued and respected and like we could voice our opinions about things, then I think then it would make the morale go up some, because you would feel like, yes, we understand, we empathize with you, you have to do these things, but we still value and respect you. And there's making sure that we have leaders in place that do that is really important. Some of the other things that I think I would want to try to get done is make sure that we have open communication between the board and the community. We need to make sure that we're transparent and that we're trying to hold focus groups and that we're talking to people in the community and we're allowing them and making them feel welcome to come to meetings. One thing that as I've been talking to teachers all across our county, and I have talked to quite a few teachers at every school, they all feel very, very, I don't want to say threatened, but they feel scared to speak up. No one wants to say anything. They feel like that they might be held accountable in ways that come out in their evaluations, or that they might feel like there would be retribution against them for saying something they didn't agree with or they didn't believe in. And to me, that's a problem. Teachers have the right to be able to speak their mind and have the right to vote and do. People are saying we can't say who we're going to vote for out in public, and I'm thinking, what? Are you serious? I mean, you're so scared of that. You can't say who you vote for. I mean, that's kind of like we're keeping teachers kind of like as prisoners, that we're not allowing them to have voices, and that's really concerns me that that's happening. And if I was elected to the board, I would welcome people to tell me things they were unhappy with or that they disagreed with me more with me, because I feel like if somebody disagrees with me, maybe I am the person that's wrong, and maybe I just don't know something that I need to know. So I would love for someone to have open dialogue with me and say, no, this is why I feel this way. And that's what makes a healthy relationship between the community and the people in leadership positions. I mean, we have to be able to take criticism and learn from it and grow from it.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to ask you real quickly. So one of the topics you hit on that's true and dear to my heart is control. From federal, state to local. Would you be willing to give up some of those concessions, that money at the federal and state level, in order to have more control?
Absolutely. I think every time that we take one more grant, or we accept one more waiver, or we do anything that gets us quote unquote more money, all you're doing is giving up more control. And you're also promising you'll do things for that money. No money comes free. No money, and we all know that in every form of government, that no money comes free in the form of grants and things. Usually it comes with rules and stipulations that you have to follow. There's one here in Pickens County, the Striving Readers Grant, that the teachers or the schools were asked to write a grant for, and they did receive. But when you get grants like that increased the testing in our schools. It increased, the kids now are taking more tests. They are having to take tests that weren't mandated by state and federal, and we already have a ton of mandated tests. And when we take extra money or more money, we are agreeing to their demands or what they want us to do. So I personally would want to say no to a lot of these things. I mean, when they took that, a lot of these schools took that grant for the healthy lunches that Michelle Obama put out. There was a lot of stipulations that came along with that healthy eating, and now every school that I walk into, you have these gross-looking meals that no child wants to eat. So they may, quote unquote, say that it's healthy, but the stuff looks like they're eating like.
Doesn't sound like it's changed much since my time. though.
Well, oh come on now, you know you love that chocolate pudding and pizza square,
Yeah, really.
Tater tots.
tater tots and
I
a
remember
hamburger.
having to barter and trade for tater tots.
Well, you know,
to pizza
it's funny because
squares.
they don't let them have all those yummy foods anymore. I mean, even tater tots and stuff, they definitely have to, you can't, they have to bake them now, and they're probably made out of some kind of bean sprouts or something. They're
I
just.
hope they're not made out of bean
Yeah, I'm
sprouts.
just
That'd be
kidding.
bad.
It would
These
be
mine were
Those
fried
are-
in trans fat.
Yeah, I know, really. And you were healthy. See?
That's right.
That's it. Yeah. I do find it interesting that school lunches now are, quote, healthy, yet our obesity problem is higher in this because
No,
the school system.
I know. I'll tell you why that's the case. That's because we don't let our kids go outside and play anymore.
That's right. That's what I was going
I
to
mean,
say.
our kids are stuck inside all day long, and we have. When I was teaching first grade, my first graders had 15 minutes of recess, and that had to include me getting them out there and getting them back in. As we all know, first graders act like a herd of cats. So it took me a while to get them back in. By the time we had any time to play, it was right around 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And we should not be expecting 6-year-olds to be sitting down for all day long and only have 15 minutes of recess. And that's not just 6-year-olds. That's all, in my opinion, elementary school. Children are not designed to sit still all day long. They're designed to explore and touch things with their hands and work together and collaborate and talk and play outside. And you know how much you learn from building forts? I mean, how much of physics and structural engineering do you learn from building a fort when you're a kid? How much trial and error it takes to build a fort that will actually stand and look like a nice fort. And we're taking these opportunities away from our students by mandating all these tests because teachers feel like they are required to prepare these students for their test. And of course they do, because now their salary depends on it.
Right.
So that's why we have obese children, because they never go outside and play anymore.
Yeah. And I use that an example, and we're getting close to time here, but my daughter had 2 friends that graduated in the past year. One from the University of Alabama in early childhood, and one from Kennesaw State in early childhood. Her friend who's teaching in Alabama is at a private teaching academy, and they are not required by the state of Alabama to do all the federal tests. They basically opt out across the board, and they're up through 12th grade and actually grade 13. They actually do college preparatory at the same school. Her friend who graduated from KSU is working in Cobb County schools and required to do all these tests. That she graduated last May, went to work, and she's teaching, required to teach, and her career and her tenure is based on it, even though for 4 years at KSU they never taught anything about Common Core.
That's right.
The day she graduated, now she's mandated to teach to a standard that the university system never taught.
That's right.
There's a problem there.
There's a major problem
And
with
then when
that.
you look academically at Cobb County, which is a good school system, and you look at Alabama and here at a private school where they're graduating at an average of 3.8 to a 3.9 GPA, Cobb County is averaging 3.3. So obviously maybe we should emulate the higher academic scores, and they have 12 tests that they do apply, one per year for the 12 years of school.
That's right.
They have 1 test a year that evaluates, and they do it in the.
It's probably a valid test too. It's probably a test that's been tested over time, whereas the milestones is a test that is not a valid and true test because it's never been tested
Academically tested.
for reliability.
Right.
And a friend of mine quit teaching also, and she's opened her own school, and it's going amazingly. And it's funny you say that because that's all she does. She does the ITBS 1 time a year.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only test that these children are taking, and it's done in a very non-threatening way where they're not being told, if you don't pass this, you don't get to pass to the next level.
Right.
And, we're not only putting so much pressure on our teachers, we're putting so much pressure on our students. To tell a 3rd grader, if you don't pass this test, you're not going to 4th grade. To tell them that 3 days of their academic career is the only thing that matters. And that's why we have such higher incidence of children with anxiety problems, children with medical problems. The instances of this happen. I think you've spoke with Meg Norris. She can probably tell you. I don't know. The instances of children being sick, mentally sick, has increased dramatically since we've placed so much emphasis on these tests.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Kathryn, I really want to thank you for being on with us.
No, I appreciate it.
If somebody wants more information on your campaign and support you and that type of thing, what's the best ways to get in touch with you?
Well, we have a Facebook page, Kathryn White for Pickens, and we also have an email account, kathrynwhiteforpickens@gmail.com. And I appreciate you having me on. If I'm elected, that I just want the parents to know that I'm in their boat too. I have children. I want the teachers to know that I will be the voice for them. We need to do what's best for our teachers too, because they are educating our future. And I want all of the citizens of our county to know that I will do what's best for our community. I mean, this is the future of our community. The schools is where it starts. This is where we're able to make a difference for our community for the rest of time.
All right,
So
all
I
right.
appreciate you having me on.
All right, thank you. And please do come back on as we get closer
Of
to
course.
the election.
You send me an invite and I'll be here.
All right, Stephen, thank you for being on again.
Not a problem.
All right, and I want to thank our sponsor again this month is Victor's Nails and Solar Tan, North Main Street in Jasper and at the Foothills Center. Stop by and see Tony and Helen and look for their spring specials. It's getting that time to start tanning again, and prom is just around the corner. So thank you, and thank you to WYYZ. Y'all have a good Saturday afternoon. Thank you.